Daniel Perry is an Army vet um, who lived in Austin. And over the pandemic summer, spring and summer, as Black Lives Matter protests were starting to build in Texas and in other places, he developed a kind of strong and violent resentment for the protests that he was seeing happening. And he started to fantasize and talk with his friends online about his desire to go to one of these protests and shoot somebody. Sometimes he would frame that as I would have to shoot somebody in self-defense, and sometimes he would just say, somebody's going to have to shoot these people. And in Austin, in the summer of 2020, he was driving an Uber in downtown Austin, where there was a Black Lives Matter protest march going on. He ran a red light, took a wrong turn into this protest march. The protesters were afraid of counter-protesters using vehicles as a weapon, which
famously happened in Charlottesville.
Right. And still has happened at least once this summer, a notable incident in New York. There was a man named Garret Foster who was at the march. He was a white man with a black partner, and he was supportive of the protest. He brought a rifle, an AK-47 style rifle, to the protest. His goal was to protect the march. He saw this car careening toward the protest. He thought it was a threat. He approached the car with his rifle. Daniel Perry was also carrying a gun. He saw this man approach with a rifle, and he pulled out a .357 revolver and shot Garret Foster multiple times.
So surely Daniel Perry is in prison.
So Daniel Perry was sent home after the shooting by the Austin Police Department. And it's important to clarify that at the moment when Daniel Perry and Garret Foster were staring at each other with guns, both of them were in accordance with Texas state law, which effectively encourages people to carry guns. And it's also important to say that Garret Foster never pointed his gun at Daniel Perry, the driver.
So when you say he approached with his gun, was it slung on his back, or?
The only picture we have of this period shows him pointing it at the ground. Daniel Perry did not testify at his trial that Garret Foster had the gun pointed at him. In the aftermath of the shooting, he was interrogated by the Austin Police Department, and he said that he was afraid Garret Foster was going to point his gun at Daniel Perry. So this is a very murky situation in a very heated environment, emotional environment, in which both of these men could plausibly say that they were afraid of the other person. But the person to point his gun at the other person and shoot was Daniel Perry. He is interrogated that night by the police department. They send him home because they think that he has a right to self-defense in that situation. Sometime later, he's indicted. A grand jury indicts him for murder. There's a trial in Austin. The jury comes down on the side that Daniel Perry did not have a right to self-defense in this situation. And the case that Daniel Perry puts up at this trial is apparently pretty weak. He does not testify himself. He does not explain why he felt that his life was endangered. The jury sentences him to 25 years for murder. And the day after, Governor Greg Abbott says that he will soon pardon this man. He believed the trial was illegitimate, and he believed that Daniel Perry had the right to self-defense.
So I have many questions. The first being, at the time, it was an open carry state.
Yeah,
in Texas at that time.
Yes. Right? Texas has expansive open carry rights. Now you do not need a license to carry. You can carry open or concealed. For a long time, Texas has been a state where it is legal to carry a long gun or a rifle. And traditionally, the people to exercise the right to carry a long gun in public are right-wing pro-gun protesters. For many years here, we had open carry marches where people would gather in the streets and carry rifles around. And there's an idea in this case that seeing a man with a rifle in public is enough to exercise your right to self-defense and kill this person. And it has to be said that this is not a right that was ever claimed against these right-wing protesters who carry rifles around in Texas.
It's not an atypical sight in Texas to see somebody walking around with a long gun.
No,
right? Especially in a protest situation.
it's not super common. It's not like people are doing that all the time, but it's certainly not. It should not be something that really raises a lot of suspicion at this point.
Right, to kind of give people like a weird anecdote. 2016, the Dallas spree killer that was killing police officers. I remember being downtown and seeing men get in a heightened situation where the police are looking for somebody that is killing them. I wouldn't call them protests. They were like gatherings downtown in Dallas, and people were walking around with long guns in that kind of scenario. So like whenever there's a mass gathering like this, it's not like going to be everybody, but you're going to see some AKs and you're going to see some things.
Absolutely. And the Texas legislature and Texas state government has really for years now, because they need to placate this kind of right-wing base and right-wing pro-gun voters, have at every available opportunity told people, like, carry more guns, carry more kinds of guns, carry them in different ways, carry them in different settings. There has not been a lot of thought, I think, about the implications of what happens when groups of people meet each other, say at a protest, on different sides of a protest, and how you litigate who has the right to self-defense. In this case, it was the person who had the right to self-defense was the person who shot first.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but when a crime like this occurs, there's a little bit more judicial process than a normal trial, right? Like you said, he had to be indicted by a grand jury, which is like a whole other separate thing.
Yeah, I mean, he had to be indicted because he was initially sent home. I don't know whether the police were in the right or wrong about that. I don't really know at this point how Texas laws about this should be adjudicated, because I think they're kind of confusing. But yes, the district attorney had a grand jury take a look at these charges, presented evidence, and the grand jury indicted. And there's some necessary background here, because the district attorney of Travis County, where Austin is a kind of people. The right wing really hates this guy. His name is Jose Garza, and partly they don't like him because of the Daniel Perry stuff, but they also really don't like him because in this summer of protests, there was some pretty, I would say, outrageous violence from police directed at protesters, and some people who got very badly injured, who shouldn't have been. And Jose Garza tried to indict some of these police officers. That really made right wingers angry. They don't like him for a bunch of reasons. And I think it made a lot of people predisposed to believe that Daniel Perry was being railroaded by this activist district attorney.
Earlier, you'd said that we knew how Perry was talking with his friends about these protests, and that he had come with the intention to do harm to somebody. How do we know that?
So the week after Daniel Perry was sentenced had some ups and downs. The day after, Greg Abbott, partly because he was being teased at the time by Tucker Carlson, who was saying Greg Abbott's not a man because he won't protect Daniel Perry. Greg Abbott vowed to pardon this man. And that was seen by a lot of people as a breach of how the judicial system is supposed to work. Very unusual. Greg Abbott very rarely pardons people. He pardons people at the end of a very long process. And he pardons people mostly for minor crimes that took place decades ago. But after he vowed to pardon Daniel Perry, the court released records from the investigation into Daniel Perry. Most of these, I believe, were not presented to the jury, so they weren't actually a factor in him getting convicted. But it includes his internet history going back months. And the main transcript of his internet history is, I believe, about 80 pages long. It contains some really disturbing things, and it helps create a portrait of this man as a very isolated, alienated, disturbed, troubled guy who was looking for trouble. He uses racist language. He calls the protesters at the BLM marches monkeys flinging shit in a zoo. He says that the BLM protesters want to take away his mom and dad's 4-bedroom house and give it to a poor black family. He doesn't seem particularly bright. He's trying to pick up minor teenagers on the internet, flirting with girls who say that they're 16, 17 years old. He talks about his time in Afghanistan, where he says he killed an Afghan man with a 50 caliber bullet, but then says he hasn't really killed yet because those aren't real people. There's a lot of disturbing stuff in there.
War never changes.
That's all for this teaser, Angry Planet listeners. If you want to hear the rest of this episode, which gets into Texas politics, goes into why Perry was probably pardoned, and explains some of the wild characters on the Texas legislative scene that may be making national premieres quite soon. We're all going to have to deal with. Go to angryplanetpod.com, sign up, $9 a month, get you access to written work, bonus episodes, and early and commercial-free access to the mainline episodes. Again, that's at angryplanetpod.com. We will be back again soon with another conversation about conflict on an Angry Planet. Stay safe until then.